This is not easy process here, and I wanted to demonstrate an air of humility to say, hey, we're struggling too, because it's just a lot to take in. And I'm hoping takeaway from people coming down and go, yeah, I can see that they are really, really trying.
A very good day and welcome to the Elora Fergus podcast. I'm Ryan Joyce.
And I'm Barbie Boy. And before we get started with today's very exciting and kind of different podcast, I want to just point out that I am not doing this in my official role as a township councillor. I'm volunteering, and it's our pleasure to try and keep you abreast of all the community news.
Yes, because today's discussion is about growing pains, and we are going to be chatting with the one and only Mayor Shawn Watters, because yesterday there was a big town hall, and it's sort of top of mind for so many of us in the community, so we wanted to bring that information that he shares. In fact, let's just get right to it with the one and only Mayor Shawn Watters. If you could, just for those that might not have been aware of the town hall, just how did it come to be, and just sort of give a 20,000-foot view.
Well, we've been doing these town meetings now since this term of council. I think, and I mentioned this last night, this is the last night's one. It was, I think, around the 15th town hall that we've done over the course of the year. We've done it in Bellwood, we've done it in Fergus, we've done it in Elora, and we've done a kind of a cycle of that. And this happens to be now the meeting in Elora. The curious thing about this is, and I had people mention it to me because they didn't realize that we had been doing these meetings. So I always find that curious. You know, you always think that everyone's connected that way. And I always find that, no, we've been doing this forever. We had someone that come to us, maybe I would say probably about a month and a half ago, saying that there's, we should have a town hall. And I said, yeah, well, we typically do it. It's usually around this time, and we're going to be doing this. And so, yeah, this was just part of the regular cycle of that. And so usually with the town hall, it's an opportunity to talk about issues within the community, and you usually try to center those issues as it relates to that part of the community. So if it was in Bellwood, it would be related to sort of issues in Bellwood. If it was in Fergus, it'd be issues related to Fergus. And in Elora, same thing. The other opportunity too with these things is sometimes those things can get a little bit more spread out, especially if there's an issue that carries beyond sort of Fergus, Elora, or Bellwood. So we just thought it was an appropriate time, and obviously lots of things happening in Elora. And so we had this lovely meeting last night.
For sure. And it was quite well attended. I will say that. We both participated and were there. I would have sort of described it as passionate. So what stood out to you most about the residents, about what the residents shared and how they expressed their concerns?
I think for me, it's always been that this community, and I'm going to talk about this part of Centre Wellington, which is Elora. It always has been a very passionate part of the Centre Wellington. They wear their hearts on their sleeves. They're very community oriented. They're looking after each other. And yeah, it's always been an interesting part of the community to navigate, just because it just is a close-knit community that way. And we saw that last night. Obviously, there's lots of things happening in the community in terms of growth and tourism, and just a lot of moving parts. And I think what ends up happening is sometimes when we have a lot of that change happening, it just, people take stock, and it does affect people's lives. And you could see that last night, that expression that way. But the approach last night was, here we have an opportunity to talk, and then I did definitely let people talk. But it was always like, we need to be respectful. We have to, first and foremost, we're not here to mention names. We're not here to, but we can talk about sort of at a healthy level, and as best we can. For us, was to receive that input. If there were things that we could respond in terms of myself or staff, then that's what we did. And yeah, that's always hard, because when you have people who care and concerned about that, there's an emotion about that, and definitely there was emotion last night. Yeah.
And so many residents sort of focused a lot of their frustrations about parking. It's a big ongoing issue. Could you just sort of reiterate the parking plan?
Yeah. So part of the thing is, part of even the reason we got into parking, or even looking at that, it's part of a bigger picture. Again, I mentioned last night that we're close to over 750,000 people visiting that part of the world, like Elora. That is a lot of people. In other communities, and we talked about it last night, communities like communities like Waterloo and Guelph are dealing with growth, just like we are. But I even alluded to it last night. Proportionally, we're doubling in size. So we're going from 35,000 to 60,000. Both Guelph and Waterloo are not doubling in size. And on top of that, we are dealing with 750,000 people coming to this community in terms of tourism. And then I think when people hear those, they're going, "Oh my God, how is a small community like that dealing with that pressure?" So we're not only dealing with growth, we're dealing with tourism. And we have a small staff. We have 150, I think, permanent staff at the municipality. And we hit above our weight big time because it's a lot of input to deal with in terms of all that kind of things. The other part of this too is we have tourism coming to our community, and that is a lot of pressure on the community, whether it be infrastructure, garbage, parking, all those kind of inputs. So one of the things that council and staff come together to think we got to have tourism help pay for tourism. It's and so that includes, what do we do with parking? What do we do with the mat tax? What do we do with Airbnb? We need to have the community that wants to come here in terms of share the joys here, be a part of this community, shop, all that kind of stuff. They got to help us out in terms of how we pay for these things. And part of the strategy, and we talked about parking, is the same thing. We've not, up to this point in time, it's been free parking, though you have to move your vehicle after 3 hours. That way, otherwise you'll be ticketed. So one of the things was maybe there's an opportunity to have people from away pay for parking. And so that was, we brought in consultants. We've gone through this process, and we're about in early next year to roll out a program where there'll be paid parking. One of the things we talked about last night is that locals will not have to pay for parking as long as they register that way. People who work in their businesses within their staff will not have to pay for parking as long as they register. And those folks from away, that if they're parking in key areas of the community, will have to pay for parking. And that is not unusual in many tourist communities, whether it be Niagara-on-the-Lake, Stratford, which I was there a few days ago. You pay for parking, and it is what it is. And we just need to be there because it's just a lot of pressure on a small community to deal with a lot of the pressure of the infrastructure, again, with the OPP, parking, garbage, all that kind of stuff. Someone's got to pay for that. And it should not be weighed on the local taxpayers that way. It should be the tourists should help pay for that.
Right. It's certainly a complicated.
It is a complicated.
Nothing is easy, of course. And the one person raised the argument that a $35 fine is less than what it costs to park in Toronto, and so they look at it less like, well, it's just a price I pay for parking illegally.
But it is. But then they're in the case of right now, they may not move their vehicle and pay the $35. At least now that $35 under a paid parking scenario comes to us directly. So then they're paying for that. So if they stay longer, there could be a combination of paid parking plus ticketed. But now the advancement with a lot of these systems is like, if you are parked at, and I've seen this before, I've registered, I'm on there, I'm paying right now. You would get maybe a warning, just say you need to put more money in your app there, otherwise you're going to get ticketed or whatever. But again, we'll figure this out. We don't have the whole scenario quite mapped out. That's why we're looking at first quarter of next year. But it'll be something that will get in place, and then we'll have to figure out how it works, and it'll morph as we understand it more and really understand sort of the technology and how this is to all operate.
I want to ask, despite the tensions and the community engagement, we're still very strong in Elora and throughout Centre Wellington and our whole township. How do you see that energy being turned into something positive for the future of our community?
Well, the fact that people came out last night, I think that's a really positive thing because, sometimes you have the tendency to want to hide behind your keyboard. And so what the offering was last night is what's to come out. We listened, we heard that way. The other part of it, I hope what people take away from it is not to feel so threatened or whatever, but approach your councillor if you have an issue or a question or a comment that way. Approach your mayor, approach staff. And then you've been at these things before, where when we do have more staff there, I'm always introducing the staff. And I said, if you need to talk about a planning issue, this is the person to talk to. So it's part of all the education part of it. And part of our job as being councillors or being in this environment is not to feel people are threatened by it, but it's to learn from it, and to learn the process and where we can help you. The interesting thing last night, we had local councillors there, we had county councillor there, and we had the mayor of Guelph there. I know I never had a chance to talk to Cam, but I would have loved to talk to him and asked him what his thoughts were last night about the process. But the process is about engagement. It's always been about that. And you're out there and the emperor has no clothes on. Literally, not that I had no clothes on, but the idea really was there I'm here. I want to hear from you. I want to, you tell it like it is. And I didn't, it was at first it was a little bit rocky, but the thing was, I was learning what we were going to do last night. We had a more formal presentation. We're going to approach it a more formal presentation, but before we went into it, I said, it seems like people are here to talk about different things. So I said to our chief administrative officer, we're not going to go there. We're just going to let people talk. And that's a very tough place to be because not that and Barb knows this, I'm not a control freak at all, but you just don't know where this is going to go. And it was kind of like that last night. But I wasn't fearful because it's not like we've done anything wrong. It's just like, for me, it's like talking about what we're doing and how we're trying to deal with the growth and how we're trying to deal with agriculture, we're trying, and even all these issues within the community. And I hope I came across and with some humility, was it's not easy. This is what we've been provided through the province. We're creatures of the province and the county. This is not easy process here. And I wanted to demonstrate an air of humility to say, hey, we're struggling too, because it's just a lot to take in. And I'm hoping my takeaway from people coming down and go, yeah, I can see that they are really, really trying, as opposed to like, I don't know what sometimes people think of local councillors and anyways, whatever. But I think the gist of it is really, again, to educate, say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're trying our best. We may not have it perfect, but I also thank you for your input because sometimes we need to hear, oh, okay, that's interesting. And there were definitely interesting moments like that going, oh, okay, I think we need to take that and look at that a little bit differently. So
for sure. Well, my big takeaway, for what is worth, the gentleman that brought up how the community came together to fight Nestle, essentially, is the same motivation that needs to happen now in terms of unity and solving the problems together. And so what is the best way for people to get involved, and how can they learn about any upcoming town halls?
Well, just on the Nestle front, which I thought was really interesting, it was this council that pushed to have that well. So this is the other part of it, which is interesting, is that, yes, public reacted. Back in the day, I was involved with, early days on the whole well thing. And yet this council had enough fortitude and obviously awareness that the well was also important for us. And so we worked with staff on that and also the local community on that too. So it was very much a community effort there. So those things can happen, and just like the well, that happened. It's now in town hands. Right.
And so, how can people stay in touch with the township's public events like these?
Well, we post them a lot. Usually, the website's a good place, township website. That way, we do post in local papers as well. That way, We have a lot of engagement. This council has been great because they've been like, I tell them all the time, they're the best council I've ever worked with. And I've worked with 6 terms of council, and they're always engaged. Like they're the most approachable of folks that way. And I love them. I love them to death. And our staff is awesome. In terms of the engagement that we have in our community, we have constant engagement. We have things coming up on the budget, things coming up on sort of all the strat plans we're doing, all that type of thing. And they're always the best place to look is on our website. And you'll see all the opportunities for engagement that way. So we go out of our way to do that. I don't know of too many communities that do the amount of effort that we do in that regard.
Mayor Shawn Watters, thank you so much for recapping yesterday's town hall and give us a little insight on what things look like for the future. Thanks so much for your time.
Again, I'd like to thank you guys for reaching out, and I really appreciate what you're doing.